Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is pretty wild. It's really cool that we get to have one last session before the week wraps up, and for some reason it's mine. We're going to be talking about writing the right thing, or write the right thing if you swap the words. But a couple of housekeeping notes. Slides are already online, so I always like to recommend to only take notes if it helps you listen to the talk. Otherwise, everything's going to be already online. We'll have the QR codes at the end, and to be honest, I like to have a lot of time for Q&A and for talking, so we'll have that too. For those of you who don't know, my name is Adam. I've been in IT for about 12 years, really doing Apple work specifically for about 10 years. I am available for hire, so you can certainly reach out to me on Slack or on LinkedIn. As it says, I do all the fun stuff: MDM, SSO, SaaS app management, all that stuff. I always like to say that I was using auto enrollment before it was cool, and not saying that as a hipster, but saying that literally when everybody was like, "What's this for? It's pointless. I can just image things." My organization made a lot of sense to be using auto enrollment at that time, so I've been doing it for a long time. Normally, I like to include a slide of my employer, the office, some info about where I work. But right now, since I am in between jobs, wanted to include my cats. So, and I'm gonna pull a Steve Jobs, but I'm gonna do it at the beginning, not at the end. Wanted to talk for a few minutes about something a little different, and that is that everybody needs to stay vigilant. And not talking about malware, not talking about Apple feedback, but I'm talking about our group, our community, and our industry. These aren't values that were established by somebody other than me. I tend to say it a lot, but you have to be vigilant about making sure that we're staying kind, humble, and curious. It's easy to thank you. It's extremely easy, and I do it too, to just have conversations that are just memes and hating on vendors or hating on Apple or hating on something going on at your organization. But it's really important not only to be helpful, but also be humble, listen to other people, seek out ideas. If somebody says they don't use SSO, instead of scoffing at them, say, "Oh, really? Why? Curious," and just be curious about the job as well. Be interested with new things. Things change all the time. It's crazy. When the 12-inch MacBook came out, it had like a single USB-C port. It felt like the world was on fire because we needed to be able to image laptops. We needed to be able to have them connect to everything in the office. But then it turns out through auto enrollment and through personal preferences that people have, that it wasn't a big deal. So always ask, what can these new things do for me? And also, just always make sure that we're upholding those values and we're mindful. And all of y'all have hung out with me for a week, so I know I might not have been practicing all of those values the entire week I was here, but just be vigilant and don't take it for granted, because it doesn't just happen on its own. So what we'll be going over today is an intro to style guides, and then also talking about how we write in email, documenting things, and also talking a little bit about user interface stuff, which we normally don't do because we're not writing apps, but there's some great tools out there to make it a lot easier for your easier to use easier to use interactive things like dialog boxes, user notifications in your script. So without further ado, we'll move on to style guides. A lot of us probably think of a style guide as that thing that we used in college that was all about formatting the document, the type size and the margins and how to write references. But a style guide can also be about the writing style of your organization or your company. It's going to include language, a punctuation, and the main goal here is to have consistent writing across many writers. So if you think about Apple support articles or Google or other companies, those articles are written by many different people, and they need a way to make sure that their voice stays consistent. So again, why it's important for you is to make sure that you have consistent and also correct writing, that you're using the proper words for different things, whether it be in adapter that's plugged into my Mac, not a dongle, or whether it be the words that we use when we tell somebody go to the SSO homepage, whatever your organization chooses to call that thing. We also want to make sure that our writing stays inclusive as well, where we're taking into account the different people that work in our organization. And one good reason that it's really great to adopt it yourself is that you can take a style guide and then have a supplement which includes your organization's just your organization's own words and phrases, and make sure that teams are using the right words and consistent words for things like your help desk or the HR section to manage your payroll, even kind of important metrics that that your company uses a lot and everybody always seems to talk about. So basically, words matter, and this is kind of a deliberate example because I just put up words that don't really match the emoji, but on the right-hand side, that's CPU isn't really the word for your computer. That's a laptop or a desktop computer or a computer. The middle one is kind of a truck, but there's a difference between buying a truck and buying a dump truck. And then lastly, French fries might be a meal for me at the airport, but it's not really a meal. So sure, it's funny to choose incorrect words like I did, but a more literal example here is Abe Lincoln on his phone wants to turn off Bluetooth. And you unfortunately see this from many vendors kind of in their customer docs, click on settings, click on Bluetooth, click on the slider to turn off Bluetooth. This is an iPhone. All what you're doing is you're tapping on settings, tapping on Bluetooth, and swiping the slider to turn off Bluetooth. Words matter. But don't reinvent the wheel. There's a couple of common style guides which are used in newspapers. The AP has one in the Chicago Manual of Style. Also for our industry, there's the Apple Style Guide and one from Microsoft. I'll mention the one from Microsoft. Apple definitely has sections on inclusive writing and things like that, but I feel like the guide from Microsoft talks more about like actual writing, good ways to format your document, have headers, subheaders, write so that it's easy for people to ingest. But yeah, the Apple Style Guide's online for free. The AP Style Guide that we do talk about is actually a paid thing, so not really something that you probably adopt. But the Apple Guides online, as you can see here, I mainly use the A to Z section for different words. So look up laptop or look up Apple Pencil, things like that. But they do also have things that go over inclusivity, the basics when you're talking about date, time, and storage, things like that. One thing that is going to feel funny is that they're all subjective, which normally isn't a good thing to have a reference guide where everybody's kind of it's based off of an opinion, but that's okay. What's more important is following the guide that is appropriate for your organization, which most of us, I'm going to say, is the Apple style guide. It's more important, and we'll talk about this a little bit with also the human interface guidelines for making dialog boxes. It's more important to follow a style guide than it is to have like the right style guide. Something that Apple's guide actually says in it, we incorporate the Chicago style guide. So your org can say that, you know, we use the Apple style guide plus these internal items. And yeah, it's definitely subjective. I don't like the AP style guide as much because they don't use the Oxford comma. It just kind of is what it is. A guide can evolve. This was in 2010. The AP guide updated website with a capital W and a space in between it to all lowercase website. And there's going to be some things in some guides that you just won't agree with. The AP style guide will actually capitalize the I in iPhone when it's used as the first word in the sentence. That just doesn't sit right, and that is included in the Apple style guide. So again, don't reinvent the guide, but use it as a resource and recommend that others do as well. It's usually about kind of identifying the guide that your org will use, which will probably just be the Apple style guide, and then having a supplement for different for different phrases, internal phrases, things like that. And again, words matter. My name's Adam. It's not Alan or Alex. And I know when I use that as an example, I'm intentionally just using the word wrong, but it's not WordPress with a capital W. It's WordPress with a capital W and a capital P. It's also not Mac all capitalized. It's Mac capital M, right? Like, so I can see a couple of good examples, and there's hundreds in the guide. It's really helpful. A computer is not a machine or a unit or a CPU. It's a computer. If you wanted to talk about the configuration of a computer with a certain type of display and some other audio video gear, that's going to be a system. And they'll have examples of using that in your writing or in a sentence. And again, words matter. When you connect an accessory to your computer, it sounds weird to say you're hooking it up or mating it, but when it does come to power, you plug in the power cable, you connect to your camera, things like that. So the first practical area that I like to talk about writing is email. If marketing has the phrase call to action, and that basically means like, what do you want people to do? And it's kind of like, what's important about this email? So if you're announcing something, you know, announcement is one thing. They get the email, okay, yeah, I'll read that later. But if there's something they physically have to do, just call it out in the subject. Say, action required. So the first email, action required. Are you using Figma? And there's going to be a link to say, yes, I want to keep my license, otherwise, that person gets unlicensed. The last example would be, announcing that a company is going to migrate from Teams to Slack, and we could do a whole talk just on communicating that and managing the whole process. But so announcement is going to be about migrating, but then later on we'll have the action required of Monday, July 1st, everybody has to log into Slack. So folks, I don't want to read email, kind of, but really, folks want to know what's important. So the 3 W's will pretty easily outline your email for you. What's going on, why is it going on, and when. I know that folks, if you're doing an MDM migration, they don't want a long email saying why you're changing from Jamf to Kanji. That's not the why, but it's more about, we're doing a migration of our management system. It's going to be a big improvement. We're going to have a better self-service, keep it simple, and then say when. Something that I like to do a lot in email, because it's easier to find a bookmark or find a browser tab than it is to find an email sometimes, is put the majority of the message, if there are going to be multiple steps that you can't shorten up, put that into a KB article. So the email gives them the what, why, and when, links to the KB article that has more extra steps to review or things like that. It's just always easier, I find, to find that KB article than go back and find that email, and I'll try and keep the email up on the screen. And always have, a next step, or if I have any questions, a resource in the email, whether it's an instruction to email a ticket or go to a certain Slack channel. It may be something that's not going to be handled by IT support, so you'll say, if you have any questions, talk to marketing or whatever. So, talking a little bit about writing docs. We all want to say nobody reads them, but of course nobody reads them because there aren't any articles to read. So we get stuck in this infinite loop where, same thing with self-service. Nobody uses self-service because there isn't anything in self-service. So, but a big picture, practical information, want to talk about how to start. Main thing is for any article, define your goal, because it's very easy to kind of start writing and start including screenshots, but kind of forget what's the actual intent of the document. And also understand and have your audience established as well. This is an article for a certain team. It's an article that it's an article for all employees, including new employees that get hired in a month or in a year from now. And definitely use a template. So most knowledge-based platforms, at the very least, can just have an article that, name it, template. When you do outline your document, I always like to point out, just because some people don't quite realize it, the heading and subheading and body formatting, that will actually create a table of contents in your document on most KB systems. So yeah, I use headers, use subheaders, and provide a table of contents, and make it scannable with those headers, because think about it, that's what you want too. When you go to a document, you want it easy to read, easy to scan through. With your goal, be careful about how you write the goal. And this is what happens when you just say to document things. I was a consultant for 6 years, and there's a lot of sharing of clients, and there's always a documentation that's the router IP address and the admin a username and password, and that's it. There isn't anything about printers or laptops or which devices are where, things like that. So make sure not to have your goal be too vague, like a document of profiles. It sounds easy, but like, what? Am I just making a list of all of our profiles and what they do? If the goal is a document how our IT team writes custom profiles and where to store them, okay, that's a good goal. So now I can have my outline, which is also my table of contents. I always like to include, especially on internal docs, a summary so that I don't get halfway through an article and realize that it's only meant for a super admin, not the regular admin or me. So, so there you go. You can talk about making the profile in either iMazing or a text editor or stuff like that. How to name the profile and where to store it. Use abbreviations correctly. It's different in chat, but it's always important in most documents that you're using the full name of whatever it is before you use abbreviations for the rest of the document. Sometimes I may not do it at all. I'm just always going to say Apple Business Manager all the way through in that document. And the best thing is use official articles too, especially when it comes to things about apps or things about services, whether it be a Gmail or the Mac or Word, stuff like that. It's already written, and also it stays up to date. One quick note, and I think this applies to a couple of different companies. Be careful with your team. You'll be in the browser, you're getting the URL for your country or your area or your language. If you change that to KB, then when that person goes to that link, it forwards to their version. Sometimes Apple will do it even if you do include the ENUS, but sometimes it doesn't always work right. So I just don't want to, well, it's easier to share things across teams using the KB version on the URL. Screenshots are dangerous, and you can very easily dump a bunch of screenshots into a document and not have writing in it and be like, it's all documented, like, I'll go to the screenshots. Main issue with that is that the document has to be accessible. So you have to have alt text on your documents, and it's also great to have captions too, even a printed caption under the screenshot. I always like to do them on a test Mac or a VM, something that stays kind of like clean. It makes screenshots look better, and also it makes sure that there aren't things on screen that shouldn't be there. Like, I don't need a menu bar that has your open apps and icons and things like that. Also be careful on Windows too. I have gotten a few ultra-wide screenshots, which ultra-wides are great for your desk, but not for your screenshots. And kind of a hot take, I really don't like screenshots in dark mode. They only make sense for people that use dark mode. Light mode or auto mode is default on the Mac, so a person that uses light mode is going to have a hard time with dark mode screenshots. A person that uses dark mode is going to be just fine with light mode screenshots. And when it comes to drop shadows, because I mentioned that because there's a built-in feature on Mac to either use a drop shadow or not use a drop shadow. I like them, but the only problem is that if you do give it a second to come back. If you don't do a screenshot of a window, you won't have a drop shadow. So then it's inconsistent. There used to be a default write command to change this on the Mac, but it's a lot easier now. When you go to actually click to take the screenshot, hold down Option and click, and that will not include a drop shadow. Cool. I can drag out this last section a little bit. So moving on to user interface stuff, which just doesn't sound as good on the slide as notifications and dialog boxes. This is a non-technical topic, but also it's not very practical if we're not talking about real apps that you'll be using in your environment. So I recommend using Swift Dialog. It's an open source, signed, and notarized package. A very easy to install, very easy to use. It's great for incorporating into your scripts and your self-service items to give feedback during things. Unfortunately, we get sometimes we have more tools than we know what to do with. So you have to be really careful when it comes to the interface stuff. Have it be things that people expect, and how do we tell people about them? Well, a lot of that comes during onboarding. Most people will have an article or a little 5-minute session during onboarding where you talk about Mac management, software updates, using self-service, and we'll also say, hey, you may occasionally receive this type of notification from our management system. Really, it's you triggering Swift Dialog. Make sure that people are comfortable with things. Which one thing that I see a lot of people wanting to do is when they want to do notifications or when they want to do dialog boxes about a certain app, they want to use that app icon in the dialog box. I don't like to do that because anybody is going to freak out if they receive a Chrome dialog box that they've never seen before. It just screams malware, and it screams just bad experience. So yeah, again, it's kind of repetitive, but write carefully, be concise, but also again, be informative. If you had a dialog box that said restart without explaining why, that's weird. The Apple style guide will say to use the arrangement of the cancel button first and then OK. The Windows guide will say OK and then cancel. Can talk about that all day. Main thing is to just choose a convention, primarily off of the platform you're working on. So Apple is cancel OK. And then similar, well, not really similar, but also available as a good resource is the Human Interface Guidelines, which goes over like how to interact with users, how to give them a control panel to adjust their settings, what to do in a notification versus a dialog box. Swift, pretty much any app in general, you have to take into consideration other users on the computer. So branding's really popular in Swift Dialog. A lot of people love having the company logo, company colors, and all of that stuff. But you have to accommodate for light and dark mode. So I intentionally set the building icon, I locked it to black to illustrate if you're using a PNG logo or something like that, you have to accommodate for dark mode or it just looks, it doesn't look good. One quick note, and again, try not to talk too much about Swift Dialog, but it's really relevant to us because it's really easy to use. Swift Dialog supports SF symbols, which is Apple's icon font, which is automatically built into all Macs, iPads, iPhones, even. And there's just a great series of icons for a lot of different purposes. There's even icons for Xbox and PlayStation. All of those icons have different color modes that respect the accessibility settings on the computer. So if I had used that properly on the branding, I would automatically have a white building in dark mode. So, and again, this applies to all of your content, but especially user interface stuff. Have to be careful about accessibility. And even when it comes to branding, every company has a version of their logo to use on a black piece of paper, so they'll have a white version of their logo. Be careful with text in images. A lot of companies have had to have like a large dialog box that kind of has like a screenshot or a video instruction on how to grant accessibility or screen capture, things like that. That's useful, but just be careful about not having too much like locked into the image. It doesn't work well in dark mode. It doesn't work well with a screen reader, with high contrast or enlarged text interface items, things like that. So we kind of touched on a little bit of things. I wanted to kind of talk about the big picture ideas like using a style guide and consistency, but I also wanted to have the practical takeaway tips across like email interface stuff. And just like I talked about not recreating a style guide, I didn't want to recreate the really great writing that Apple and Microsoft have on writing inclusively, writing well, writing concisely. So that is actually all of that. So the slides are online on the right, and of course the session survey, which you've been getting pelted with QR codes and emails about that all week, that's on the right-hand side. So I hope everybody had an amazing week. I certainly did. My first and last session here was in 2016, so it's been way too long. So I'm really happy to be back. And yeah, so more importantly though, any questions? Thank you. And I will say questions or comments. I'll take comments as well. Sure, so we just got to give the box a few seconds to turn on, and if somebody in the front wants to grab it and then send it back there. There. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes. So it's not about your presentation. I would like to hear from you, especially when we document the term user.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. Asking about using the word user, we could actually jump into the Apple style guide. Yeah, that's a tricky one, because sometimes in internal documentation, you do want to have a word that implies the person operating the computer, the user. But culturally, user becomes like a separation, like, oh, like those people. Like, it's not really a separation, like all of us are coworkers. So yeah, coworker is a phrase that I like to use when I talk about, our department manages a device as well for the company so that our coworkers can get their job done. Maybe that's not a great sentence, but I kind of see the point there. But yeah, there are times where, depending on the purpose of the article, you do have to use user versus administrator of the system. One good tip, though, on that point is I do it myself a lot by accident. I say regular user when I'm talking about a standard user. Regular user like separates people, and it's also just not the right phrase. Like, we're all regular users, but when it comes to a permission, it's basically a standard user or an administrator.
One follow-up question. And also, when you use the word, like especially when you're documenting on a ticket, like right after the word user or regular user, whatever you prefer to use, like do you use like he or she, or I personally use their or them?
Yeah. I think I don't want to say it as a statement because I don't want to be like the appropriate resource, but I traditionally use they or that person's a preference, but I would check the inclusivity writing in like Apple Style Guide or any of the guides.
Thank you.
Cool. Anybody else? We got one over there.
I have, I guess, two questions here. The first one is in regards to when we're doing documentation, and if you want to add just graphics for reference, how much is too much?
Yeah, I would definitely say that the graphics each graphic should have a specific point, even if the point is, I know that the interface on this system is kind of tricky, so here's the screenshot showing you the certain section that you need to go to, and then here's the screenshot showing you how when you go to that page, you have to do a bunch of scrolling to get to that. So basically say like, okay, what's the point of each screenshot?
Okay, and the second one is, how could I delicately put this? How do you, I guess to keep things coherent, how do you not dumb it down so much where you have to just, make step by step? For instance, when I say, let's say, search for a particular app, you don't want to say, hey, go to the spotlight search, but then, hit the, command key and then space bar, and then, because then it just becomes a whole big jumbled mess.
Right, yeah. I know exactly what you mean, because we need that first direction of like, go to applications and open up Zoom. And that may be a little vague, but depending on the wording, that may actually be nice, because that can be easily translated by the person in their mind because they're comfortable with their device. So, go to applications. That person's going to translate it as, okay, I can do that via Spotlight. I can do it via the sidebar on Finder, or I can do it via my dock, which is on my right-hand side, rather than saying, go to the dock at the bottom of your screen and go to Launchpad, because the dock may not be on the bottom. And I think a lot of it will also come with some practice, and that's where that consistency is going to come. Is that once you have like a good method for referring to that thing, then what's important is always doing it that way.
Yeah, because the reason I bring that up is because we have I create a distinction of owners versus users of Mac devices. You have people that own it and say, hey, I have a Mac device, but then they couldn't tell you the first thing about it. That's why it's a matter of, hey, what's that blue thing at the bottom there? And I'm just saying to myself, that's your flux capacitor. Put the thing down.
But,
And then you have users that can say, oh, yeah, I'll go into the terminal, do this, this, and this, so they know what they're doing. That's what I'm trying to, I guess, that fine line of, okay, this person has no idea versus this person, I'm borderline insulting them.
Yeah, no, and it's true, and your documentation can get very wordy if you say, go to your applications and open up Zoom for the first time. That can get really wordy if you say, go to your applications, which is available via the Launchpad at the bottom of your screen, or go to Spotlight, which you activate by pressing Command space. Yeah, you have to maintain the ease of use of the article is maybe a tiny bit more important than describing it 100%. And I think that's something that you can also borrow from how vendors write their guide. If you read the article on how to pair your headset with your iPhone, the first step is going to say, go to settings. It's not going to say swipe up to go to your home screen and tap settings. It's just going to say go to settings. And yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. And we'll go around the front.
So one thing that I do for that is I often will write to assume that people know the basics, but include at the beginning, if you require additional assistance, please contact the help desk here.
Yeah. And something also practical on the level of like getting to different areas in Mac, because docks are different and Finder windows are different. And Finder window, I will say, usually this is an email more than in a document, but I'll say, open a Finder window, click the face in the dock, that type of stuff. But yeah, my original point about navigating on the Mac would be, the Apple menu is always there in the top left, and it can get you to our system settings, and it can get you to restart. So a lot of it comes off of, not going to say like click settings in your dock or do a spotlight search for Bluetooth. I'm going to say go to the Apple menu, click on system settings, and then click on Bluetooth. And yeah, and then also if you think about the difference between system preferences and system settings, then you can kind of say like, okay, what's an effective way that I can give this instruction without having to give two versions of the instructions. So I'll just say, click on system settings, or I may say system preferences or system settings, and then I'll just say click on Bluetooth. I won't say in the third row, click on Bluetooth, or scroll down and click on Bluetooth. So.
One of the things I've done with some of my documentation is just assume nothing and spell out at the beginning, these directions presume that you know how to find the applications folder. If you have trouble with that, please make contact with our service desk. But then, again, even a short 1 or 2 line prerequisite,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term,
Yeah.
and then launching into the procedure seems to help. And
Yeah.
most people know how to sort themselves into the category of whether they know that or don't know that.
Yeah.
And then they can follow whatever
Yeah.
appropriate steps are.
That's cool. I like that. That speaks well towards consistency and context. Literally, when you write a document, have a summary of anything that they need as a prerequisite, even if you're doing
Right.
it internally, and you're writing about modifying something on a system because it's a common thing that we need to do. Let me know what admin level I need at the beginning of the document, rather than me spending a couple minutes accessing a certain menu and then realizing I don't have the right admin level. So
Yeah, we for our internal documentation for our technical team, we will treat it more like a recipe where you need the following access.
Yeah,
you
that's
need
great.
this tool. You need access to this key to get into this room, and then kind of then go down the specific numbered procedure of what to do once you have all those ingredients.
That's great. I like that. Oh yeah, we got a couple.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I guess just to follow up on that, at least in our environment, in our knowledge base, we actually, at the bottom, we have that sort of disclaimer of if you need additional support, reach out to us. But our system has its problems. But one of the nice things about it is you can actually get feedback from users. So if an article is just missing the mark, they can put that, and then you could solicit additional feedback from them. Well, is something missing? Is something outdated that maybe we didn't get to? Because as knowledge bases grow and grow, that becomes a job in and of itself to kind of keep track of and keep up to date. So
Yeah.
if you're able to get feedback from people who are using the stuff you're writing, however that may be, is super, super helpful. And then I guess just about the emails, a quick tip, and I might be met with like a massive duh. But when I'm personally writing emails that are really important, like a please read kind of thing, I always take it outside of Outlook and I'll just write it in Word, because that way I can get that spell correction.
Yeah,
The subject
and grammar.
line is notorious. It doesn't have spell correction, and you could get a typo in there. In my last job, somebody wrote an email to 1,000 people that said, please read. So just a FYI, maybe somebody needed to hear that today, to maybe use Word instead of Outlook
Yeah.
for spelling.
That's cool. That's great. Yeah. On that note, we didn't talk about accessibility in emails, but that is also another area that you have to be mindful of. Just be mindful of accessibility, period. But do keep that in mind in the emails. We do sometimes see those emails. They do the yellow highlighting and they do the red text. It just doesn't. It's just not easy to read. It doesn't do what you think it's going to do.
No.
Cool.
So this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. Just a couple of comments. A long time ago, somebody asked Neil Gaiman, one of my favorite authors, how do you decide what you're going to write about? And he said, well, I just write things that I would like to read. And I do a lot of documentation. I also have to consume a lot of documentation. And I've become kind of curmudgeonly lately with videos. Videos done well can be good documentation, but they should not be the only documentation, one. But on top of that, video without commentary is atrocious.
Yeah, it's hard
Yeah.
to follow.
And I could keep going on about video, but I also think about YouTube. I don't know how many times I have tried to Google, how do I do something like this? And it takes me to a YouTube video. And for something that takes 30 seconds,
That has like a 5-minute introduction.
it's a 5-minute video. So, and meeting videos. It's great that people like to record their meetings in Zoom because it's right there.
Yeah.
But please, please, for the love of God, don't ask me to go back and watch a meeting, a 1-hour meeting, when you could have just summarized it in 5 minutes.
Yeah, that is actually really applicable to documenting new systems and projects. Project planning notes and project boards make great resources, but they're not a documentation about your new office that just opened up. They're just things that were going on during the project. And it's the same thing with the video meeting. I recommend having like a project wrap up meeting to make sure that we've actually finished deploying everything that we need to do when we're launching this new system, including the step to document it. But then that video could be a good resource for somebody, but that video is not the documentation about that new system. So yeah, video is very effective, but it's not supposed to replace things. Some people learn via writing, some people learn by physically doing, some people learn better with a video. It doesn't mean only do one of those things. It means do these things, do these things all at the same time, which is a heavy ask for our documentation. But if you're going to be incorporating video, incorporate it well by just being mindful of those things. Cool. Not sure where the box ended up. There's one right behind you.
So I have been accused at multiple times of being very wordy.
Yeah, me too.
And a lot of the things that we've just talked about, putting the sort of prerequisites or assumed knowledge at the beginning, video, maybe, doing something that's quicker that way. But do you have any good tips or strategies for self-censoring? What to cut out, what to leave in?
Yeah, I think reading other people's work is really good, and it's always so hard to talk about documentation because what you want to do is like pull up some organization's really good documentation, but you can't really do that in a presentation. But yeah, just it sounds a little vague, but yeah, try and read a lot from other people. learn a lot. Read KB articles, even those ones that are meant for administrators. Zoom, Slack, Google, 365, all of those systems have a lot of admin-facing documentation. And just when you're reading through it, kind of like pay attention to how the document that you're reading, got created. So, and yeah, anytime that you can, I would recommend having, find a friend that's good at documentation, or have somebody that you're able to bounce your writing off of. There are some things that ChatGPT can help with, but very rough draft stuff. But it's not something where you're able to like put your writing in and automatically get something great out of it. But you sometimes can put your writing in and have a couple of parts that it rewrites. Okay, those few things are helpful. So.
So in a previous position, I had built what I thought was a pretty good knowledge base for end users. I made sure everybody knew about it. I even went as far as to make video documentation on how to use that documentation.
Sure.
And people saw it. I got confirmation that people watched it, and they were very well informed on what we as the IT department were doing. And then they didn't use it.
Yeah.
In my current position, I know that making similar documentation is going to be on the horizon, so I'm lucky to have had previous experience to build off of. I want to make sure that I don't have that same problem again, so what do you think I could do to just get my utilization up?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's an important question because it definitely applies to a lot of organizations. It's also a very big thing to think about. I think a lot of times it's when you can just ask for feedback. It's possible that people don't need those articles as much. It's possible that it's not enough of a routine for them. And sometimes a smaller percentage, it's not effective for them to go to an article. It is more effective to get assistance with it or get conversational help with it from an IT person rather than try and work their way through the article. There's plenty of times where someone may come to me after they've read the article because it just isn't making sense for them for whatever reason. So yeah, try and get feedback. It's possible that the content either isn't needed because it's more straightforward than people thought. When it comes to documenting some of the different services we have, like Slack, I'm not necessarily going to write up a bunch of stuff about using Slack and channels and everything, but on I say our, but I'm not anywhere right now, but you can have a Slack page in your knowledge base that links to a couple of good articles, a couple of KB articles from Slack about how to do different things like editing your profile or other things like that, and then maybe have some internal tips and tricks or just internal information like here's how we lay out our channels and things like that. So yeah, hopefully all of that made sense together. But yeah, if you can, sometimes group meetings are helpful. Sometimes it can even just be water cooler conversation and be like, hey, I was curious, do you use the knowledge base a lot? Have you seen other people using it a lot? And it's just it's always gonna take time and grow the use of the knowledge base, but it's still a lot more frustrating when it's not there.
Cool, thanks.
Cool.
I think something that is also important to mention in a discussion like this is setting a cadence with your team on how often you update your KB articles if you write a lot of them.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of knowledge-based systems, you're able to set expiration dates, or one of them calls it a renew, or basically a date that it doesn't expire and go offline, but it's basically a date of go and check this article. Is everything still applicable? Is it needed anymore? Absolutely. Yeah.
I just wanted to, follow up on yours. So I think one of the questions you maybe want to ask if you haven't is how isn't your knowledge base getting promoted with your users? Because like we've been in the same boat where I am, where put in a ton of time and then maybe it's just not getting circulated the way it needs to be. And users, as you probably know, they're always going to find the path of least resistance. And talking to a person is generally going to be faster than reading a paragraph for most small things. So trying to get them out of that habit of pushing them to the knowledge base first may help get that utilization up, especially if you have like high volume times, like if you're in a thing where like maybe it's busier certain times a year, getting that information there to save them time to then save you time.
Yeah. Yeah, two good points on that. One good thing to target with the writing is things that people need to do manually for whatever reason on a regular basis, whether it be once a month or once a year. Those are the things that are great to have written up. And it's okay for your answers to be, you know, here's the link on how to do that. Even if people aren't going to that a lot by themselves, at least it becomes a tool for you when you're answering tickets to just, you know, here's the article and one behind you. So.
Just be careful that you don't make it too complicated. At a previous job, we had our knowledge base built into the ticket system, and so when you would go into the system to submit your ticket, it would say, you know, what is your category, it would automatically filter by, like, if you are a student, it would give you these list of things to check. If you're faculty, these list of things. And you say, you know, is for a computer or, you know, network or whatever. And you'd have to click through and, like, navigate through the menu, and then it would suggest knowledge articles. And if that didn't help, then you could submit a ticket and say, I need help with this specific thing.
Why not just let me write the ticket and then let me know if you think that there's some articles that are helpful?
Yeah. And so they ended up having to rework things, and at least they had multiple methods. There was still like the phone number listed right there on the right at all times. There was a chat option as well. So if people didn't want to click through and get through all the complicated stuff, but it also did help the help desk know, okay, this user tried our stuff and it's something beyond that. So it cuts out a lot of the troubleshooting steps.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, cool, yeah.
But.
Okay, too. Yeah. I was going to say something how I feel like I always get that, have you tried this link? And I already have a lot of times when I'm putting the ticket in, but that's just my style. I'd rather go to a knowledge base article first. So.
And I did also have a question.
Yeah.
Does anyone have recommendations for knowledge base products that are actually nice to use and easy to edit?
Yeah. I was recently using Slab, and there's actually a couple different things that I really liked about it. It made it easy for a document to actually exist in two categories, which was nice. So if you go into the Mac section, which all the sections were small, but if you go into the Mac section, there's the article on camera access and screen sharing access. But then if you go to the Zoom section, there's an article on camera access and screen access, and it's the same article in both.
Yeah, right now we use a Trello board for our internal documentation, and it's not ideal.
Oh, wow.
But then our website is completely outside of us because the communications team has all access over that, so it's not great.
Yeah. So I found Slab pretty nice to use. We moved over to Notion for other reasons because we really wanted like a company-wide knowledge base, and Notion was easier to write in. But yeah, there was good features in Slab that were helpful. So, and one in the back end, I think, over here.
I guess just to try and extend off of that, I guess it just depends on your audience, but as far as like IT goes, we're working on trying to move away from one of our user-facing KBs, but I've found like for IT-related knowledge bases, it's highly advantageous to have data locality, at least in our team, just because it allows us to use like CLI tools to be able to, grep for some phrase or link that is no longer relevant. I can quickly update that throughout the whole knowledge base very easily.
Yeah.
But I guess that just depends on how much you value that locality. But as far as some other tools that we've been currently looking to would be like SharePoint. I've heard some teams of using Notion, using like Trello boards. But those are just some that we looked offhand. And at a prior position we used Confluence, but I personally didn't really like that.
Yeah. There we go.
So I just wanted to harken back to a point you made and kind of address that point too, which is Swift Dialog is awesome. And it can be used for more than just notifications. When we have any kind of complex software installs that have license requirements and don't always work great, IBM, we like to put Swift Dialog in front because you can get some of your knowledge base in there if you have it appropriately sized, but you can also get in front of getting them to that article without them needing to go to support. You can give them the more information options, the help options, the ability to instantly bail to your article and intercept them at that point rather than them having to get in and search through categories, which end users don't generally like.
Yeah, like, we can do a lot in AppleScript with dialog boxes, and a lot of times it's not about the tools that you use, but there are definitely features in Swift Dialog that just make things better for folks, like, like having the cancel button, but also having a more info button, which goes to an article.
Or a progressive, another thing Swift Dialog does, people don't know, is progressive updating. So if you are doing a longer install, you can provide information to them, carousel information, quite a lot of different things to provide that as they go.
Cool. Awesome. Cool. Any other questions? I think we're good then. So we can go wait a little bit for lunch, but lunch will be starting soon. So thank you. Thank you. I don't know why I'm clapping.